Before we analyze the first point, I wanted to give a quick outline of how the first point of Eichenwalde is structured. So first of all, we have 4 main flanks. We have the flank all the way through the right, which characters like Pharah or Genji can go through, which usually ends up with the flanker either exiting via this exit or coming over here directly behind the car. We have the stair flank, which usually consists of the defending team holding further back, which allows the attacking team to go through the main choke easily and then go up the stairs, and then from there they can get to this supplementary high ground. We have the rooftop flank, which is mainly for a Far Mercy comp, which is going over this main roof. And then, you know, if the defending team is attacking right at the front of the choke, they can get an angle that way. And then we also have the health pack flank, which is similar to the rooftop flank. It relies on the defending team attacking further back on the point. And it usually consists of going via this left route near the mini health pack. Now, in order for names of different locations, this is going to be the main choke. This is going to be the right fork. This is going to be the left fork. This is going to be the high ground. This entire area is going to be called catwalk. And this little piece of cover right here is the tank. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let's get into the analysis.
Glad he's with us here today on Eichenwalde and with us as we move forward in the Overwatch League.
It's a great tribute to him, to be sure.
Absolutely. Well, time to get things started on our final map of this series. Florida Mayhem on the attack one more time. And San Francisco Shock, they're already winning this series, but we play all 4 maps of points are important, Monte Cristo.
Well, not in preseason so much, Doa, but they will be important in the future.
Well, thank you again. I'm glad that hype killer Monte Cristo is alive and well.
Hey, I'm just excited to see these teams. You know, we get to see all the players on these teams and get a real sense of how they might be come the regular season in January. And speaking of which, we are going to see an Orisa here on your screen right now. Swoosh, up in the front lines yet again as they slowly push their way. Again, the Orisa Roadhog combo to get some of these early picks. They've already found their way to some control percent on the point.
Yeah, it wasn't too slow after all. Oh, found the Zenyatta. They got that first tick already here on point A. Got to take the point to get that payload moving, of course. Dante does come in and take out Tavik, who's brought back by Zebasai right away.
Now, earlier Valkyrie for Zebasai this time around does do him a few favors at Tavik.
Right.
Got to find both supports with them.
The San Francisco Shock struggled with some severe roster problems in the preseason. They are drowning in very talented hitscan players, but the only true projectile player on their team is Nevix, who is forced onto the off-tank role until the roster is completed with Sinatra and Super. Baby Bay can play a decent Genji, but not putting him on hitscan is wasted talent. This puts them at a huge disadvantage, because they can't really get as much value out of comps such as Far Mercy or even just running a good Junkrat. The Shock, however, try to make the best of it, putting both Baby Bay and Dante on their signature heroes, Soldier and Tracer. This is a smart choice. They both show outstanding expertise in those particular characters, and it'll be beneficial. Dante is known to play Tracer less like an assassin compared to other players like Sinatra, focusing mainly on bullying tanks and creating opportunities with pulse bombs, which allows him to perform a lot more consistently than other Tracer specialists. Putting Baby Bay on Soldier is a comfort pick as well, definitely a signature hero. Overall, their comp is not the most optimal. Junkrat spam could have really helped, or even a Far Mercy on defense can be strong when defending on point. The comp isn't necessarily bad, but compared to the Mayhem, it is clear that they are just running what they feel most comfortable on, as their unfinished roster makes running an optimal composition unfeasible. The Mayhem, on the other hand, are running a meta comp if you can see past logics on McCree. Orisa Roadhog is a pretty good combo, allowing Roadhog to drown in hook opportunities thanks to Halt, and giving Orisa the space to pull people when she wants, since she'll have plenty of follow-up. It's a great combination because even with subpar communication, it can still do extremely well, because a good Roadhog player can keep an eye on Orisa to not miss Halt opportunities, and even if she hits someone with Halt, not having follow-up is not a huge deal. I hope that they did coordinate the combo regularly, especially near the start of the first take, to give themselves an advantage. But teamfights can get heated, so having a combo that can still function just based on natural synergy between players is strong. But one thing that is worth mentioning is Twig's Junkrat pick, and Logic's McCree pick. Especially for Eichenwalde, running something like a Tracer could be a better idea, or even a Pharah or a Genji, although those two characters are outside of Logic's hero pool. However, the Mayhem have a very set strategy that they are trying to execute, compared to the Shock's more on-the-spot composition. Their general strategy is to let Orisa create hook opportunity after hook opportunity for Roadhog, and with a Junkrat and McCree, every single hook is basically guaranteed to end in a kill. Roadhog, after his changes, doesn't really do well as a flanker anymore. He really relies on his teammates to help him finish off targets he hooks in, and having the massive burst from the Junkrat and the flashbang from the McCree preventing potential escape abilities like Moira's Fade or Reaper's Wraithform allows them to get constant picks. This should keep the Shock on their toes in terms of positioning, as they are going to get punished permanently. This is a very solid strategy that is going to give the Mayhem, especially Tvik on Junkrat, plenty of ult charge, while allowing them to snowball pick after pick. Just in terms of team comp alone, the Florida Mayhem definitely have a huge advantage, and I really like how they are making the most out of potentially unfinished rosters, although it is unfortunate that the Shock simply don't have the players yet to run full strategies. The Shock might have tried to hide their strats until they are at their full roster and the main season starts.
So, glad he's with us here today on Eichenwalde and with us as we move forward in the Overwatch League.
It's a great tribute to him, to be sure.
Absolutely. Well, time to get things started on our final map of this series. Florida Mayhem on the attack one more time, and San Francisco Shock,
The Shock are defending on the point, which is the standard defense strategy for the first point of Eichenwalde. Defending at the choke is the usual strategy for lower ranked competitive matches due to uncoordinated teams not being able to deal with all the spam coming down their way. But defending at the choke against a coordinated team just makes them way too vulnerable to flankers. A Pharah, for example, could fly above the roof of the mega health pack building to the left, a Genji could flank via the right, and a Winston D.Va could just dive straight to point. This would leave the defending team without an escape, and it's going to end with them being pressured from all sides. If, however, they defend on the point, they can't really get flanked. They are defending right on front of high ground, allowing them to put their soldier, for example, on top of the balcony on the point. And considering that the right side of the point is basically the edge of the map, it makes it very hard for the attackers to flank, basically forcing the attackers to a direct confrontation. The attackers do, however, still have an advantage: the clock tower in the middle. The reason this building is important is because it basically creates two paths to the point, one on the right via the street and the left one past the damaged tank. The left side gives you some great cover and a slight flank opportunity via the route with a mini health pack, whereas the right side is more exposed but can give someone like Roadhog good hook opportunities. Having two paths of attack allows the attackers to apply pressure from two sides. The defenders, however, can use their high ground advantage to defend this. So it's really about which team can use their advantage better. Can the attackers abuse their superior angles of attack, or can the defending team abuse their high ground and cover?
Already winning this series, but we play all four maps. The points are important, Monte Cristo.
Well, not in preseason so much, Doa, but they will be important in the future.
Well, thank you again. I'm glad that hype killer Monte Cristo is...
So sadly, the spectator experience is still in its infancy, and as such, it can be a little hard to see what's going on from the other side of this wall, since the character outlines are white, no matter which team the character belongs to. Junkrat, Mercy, and Roadhog are from the Mayhem, D.Va and Winston from the Shock. We could also see how Shock's soldier set himself up on the high ground to the right. This really showcases the Mayhem's strategy and how they are splitting up. The Mayhem are playing a standard 2-2-2, and they are splitting themselves up on both sides of the road. They are putting one tank, one support, and one DPS down each path from what it looks like, and try to apply equal pressure from both sides. Roadhog, Mercy, Junkrat from the left, Orisa, Zenyatta, McCree from the right. This is incredibly efficient, and again just shows how incredibly well prepared the Mayhem were. In terms of pure player talent, the Shock have players that are more individually skilled, but the Mayhem are so incredibly coordinated and prepared in order to try and outweigh that.
Alive and well.
Hey, I'm just excited to see these teams. We get to see all the players on these teams.
This is actually a pretty important moment. Mayhem's Orisa just placed down her shield on the point, which was their main goal. The Mayhem want to regroup on the point and take that space, forcing the Shock even further back. This is actually quite poetic. The Shock defended on the point in order to be safer. They wanted to prevent their opponents from flanking them, but that safety is now their demise, as they are getting pushed further and further back towards the edge of the map that gave them security just moments ago. At this point, the Mayhem basically won the fight already, without even getting a single pick. They are all on the point and just waiting for someone on the side of the Shock to get out of position, since they'll eventually need to contest the point. The Shock can try to retake that space, but Orisa is just so incredibly good at holding space that it's too late. The Shock needed to get a pick or play aggressively earlier, but now that they have given Orisa what she needed, there's not that much they can do anymore.
And get a real sense of how they might be come the regular season in January. And speaking,
this is unfortunate. The Florida Mayhem tried going for their first hook, but missed it. This isn't the biggest blow in the world, considering how good their positioning is this far, but it's still worth mentioning. Luckily, Mayhem's McCree manages to take down the enemy Tracer, essentially securing the fight. Shock's Tracer was their best chance at securing a pick, and thus alleviating all the pressure the Mayhem are generating. In order to do that, she had to play aggressively. Either she would get a pick, or the Mayhem would slowly kill her team and take the point. She tried to go for the higher risk play and sadly failed. This does not, however, make the play bad. If Shock's Tracer played it safe, then they would have no shot at actually defending this point, so it was the correct move. One of the main factors in this being a high risk play is Shock's Mercy as well. In order for Shock's Tracer to actually get a pick, she needs to get behind and she needs to get close. This puts her in a position after she dies where it is basically impossible for Shock's Mercy DAG to resurrect her. While the fight was honestly already pretty much won as soon as the space around the point was taken, considering that the Mayhem could have just rezzed whomever Shock's Tracer could have potentially picked off, after Shock's Tracer dying, there's really no chance for them to recover.
of which we are going to see an Orisa here on your screen right now. Swoosh, yeah, up in the front lines yet again.
This is where the Shock called a full-on disengage. They realized that they can't really keep fighting with their Tracer dead, so they decided to fall back, which is why Shock's Winston jumped on top of the building to the right, their D.Va Mercy are all stuck at the edge of the map to the left, and their soldiers and Yatta are falling back in the building in front of the point. All they want to do right now is not die, wait for Tracer to come back, and then launch a full-blown retake attempt, trying to push the Mayhem back and retake their space. The odds definitely favor the Mayhem, but this play from the Shock was definitely the correct one, seeing that they don't really have another choice.
They slowly push their way. Again, the Orisa Roadhog combo to get some of these early picks. They've already found their way.
This is actually hilarious. As Mayhem's Orisa is jumping around, he actually spots Shock's soldier moving past him on the right, although he might have missed it, and you can also see how he has a Harmony Orb on him, which confirms that Shock's Zenyatta is also still around there somewhere. Having Harmony Orb allows Shock's soldier to push in a bit more aggressively and try to farm the rest of his ult, so he is prepared for the imminent retake attempt. The streets to the right are actually pretty open right now, considering that Mayhem's Orisa has taken point control, while Mayhem's Roadhog is pushing towards D.Va and Mercy to the left. Shock's soldier probably saw this opening and figured that he could try to gain a favorable angle to attack from for when the rest of his team engages, especially considering he has Tech Visor, and he probably doesn't plan firing that into an Orisa shield.
Some control percent on the point.
Yeah, it wasn't too slow after all. Oh, found the Zenyatta. They got that first.
Finally, we get some third-person perspective. Just a second ago, we could see Shock's soldier rotate to the right, trying to flank the Mayhem and avoid Orisa's shields, while Shock's Winston and Tracer are now entering the fight. They lost a tick, but that is really not that important. Considering that they just lost their D.Va mech, however, due to Mayhem's Roadhog pushing in aggressively just a second earlier, since D.Va and Mercy aren't really a huge threat to him, the Shock are again at a disadvantage. It's not insurmountable, but it's a disadvantage nonetheless. It really depends on how well Shock's Tracer and Soldier play out this pincer while trying to get a pick, although I would say that the Mayhem are maintaining the upper hand.
Pick already here on point A. Gotta take the point to get that payload moving, of course.
This is the Resurrect I was talking about earlier. Shock's Tracer actually managed to find a pick on Mayhem's Junkrat, which allows them to push in further and regroup on the point. However, their Soldier is in a 1v1 against Mayhem's McCree right now, as McCree probably heard Soldier's steps. While the Shock don't really have a mech, she can try to rebuild it, while the Mayhem have already used the Resurrect. This means that if the Shock can stall this for long enough, their D.Va can re-enter her mech and then take the 6v6 against Mayhem with the res advantage.
Dante does come in and take out Tavik, who's brought back by Zeb.
Shock's Soldier, however, died, which isn't surprising, considering that he was pushed into a close-range engagement against Mayhem's McCree. Since Shock's Soldier was also on a flanking mission, it is once again incredibly difficult for Shock's Mercy to actually res him. If she could do that, then there is a good chance the Shock might be able to turn this around using Tech Visor and their overall ult advantage in general. However, with Mayhem's Mercy just using Valkyrie, it's best that the Shock just focus on stalling this for as long as possible to waste the Mayhem's time. Sit on the ultimates that they have, and then eventually take a cleaner fight in the second phase when they can abuse the castle high ground with Soldier.
Right away.
Now, earlier Valkyrie for Zebasai this time around does do him a few favors, and Tavik try to find both.
At this point, the Mayhem are just cleaning up the clumped up San Francisco Shock on the point, and the fight is over. They were relying on the tactical visor from their Soldier to take out Mayhem's DPS, but this just shows how beautifully the Mayhem executed the comp. So many people were focused on the Hog Orisa, but those were just part of a bigger plan. Orisa Roadhog isn't all about getting hooks left and right, it's about creating insane amounts of space for your team while denying that space to the enemy team. Their aggressive play and push onto the point forced the Shock into one little corner, which allows the Mayhem's Junkrat to spam as much as he wants and beat the Shock. The reason this comp worked was not because Orisa and Hog landed hook after hook. It's because they had an insane amount of control over the entire point, enabling their McCree and Junkrat to apply maximum pressure and make the Shock explode under it. Granted, the Mayhem might have used that Valkyrie a little too early, but that brings us to the second phase now. Overall, the Shock definitely have the advantage here. Their Winston D.Va tank combo wasn't really designed to shine on the first point, but to flow over into the second stage and use their verticality to control the entire castle. Winston and D.Va can go up and down whenever they want, diving on the Mayhem's heroes and abuse their biggest weakness: immobility. The Mayhem are incredibly immobile. Both of their tanks just want to stand on card and play their combo. McCree can't really move around a lot either. Mercy doesn't have anyone to fly to, and Zenyatta can float, not fly. Junkrat has some verticality, but that shouldn't be enough to pressure the Shock off of the high ground. The Shock can dive those immobile heroes and waste their time, allowing Shock's Mercy, Zenyatta and Soldier to stay on the high ground. That triple combo is actually incredibly strong, as a damage-boosted Soldier can melt through discorded targets, while being essentially undiveable thanks to the triple heal setup with Mercy's Beam, Zenyatta's Orbs, and Soldier's Biotic Field. If the Shock play this correctly and don't get pushed down from the high ground, in theory, this phase should be incredibly hard to push through for the Mayhem. The Mayhem, however, have one ace up their sleeves: Orisa's Halt. This doesn't have anything to do with their Orisa Hog combo necessarily, however one of Orisa's main strengths next to her insane ability to take space is to deny high ground. If the Shock just take one wrong step, Mayhem's Orisa can pull all of them down into a position that they'll be very uncomfortable in. Shock's Mercy also has a dilemma, considering that her frontline on the low ground might need healing that goes past what Zenyatta can do with his Harmony Orbs, which again hinders her safety. So in all actuality, the Shock need to hold high ground against an Orisa that can knock them down whenever she wants, while trying to dive enemies who are all stacked up on the payload getting passively healed, making it incredibly hard for someone like Tracer to confirm kills without an Ana grenade. This again shows how both teams had a really good plan, but the Mayhem were one step ahead. The Shock could try to outrange the Mayhem, but if they split too far away from their frontline combo, they'll be useless, and Soldier's effective range isn't infinite either. This is close, but in the end, the Mayhem do have the advantage if they play their comp right. Shock's Tracer will be useless against the McCree protecting his clumped up team that is being healed by the card, while Shock's Soldier is so far away and at risk of losing the high ground control at any moment that they'll be incredibly handicapped. A good pulse bomb could help them regain momentum, however. One of Orisa's main weaknesses is that she can struggle a bit with regaining momentum once she loses it. Although a pulse bomb alone would be good enough, considering that the Mayhem could just res it and then regain the momentum using their halt hook combo. This would be a situation where a Junkrat could be insane, but the Shock are sticking with comfort picks for now, once again being held back by their limited roster. Okay, so now that the Mayhem have captured the first point, let's quickly go over the second part of Eichenwalde. So there are generally three main areas where the defenders would like to defend. So we have the primary corner over here, we have the second corner over here, and then we have this last stretch near the end. Now the reason why these are great areas to defend in is because these first areas are very, very exposed to the castle up here, and the second part is right around the corner, which also gives the defenders an advantage since they can abuse the corner to control line of sight. And this last area is relatively easy to defend because the defenders can again attack the attackers from multiple angles. Okay, now generally, the defenders want to position themselves on this section of the castle instead of here, and in my opinion, the reason for this is that this area over here is easier to flank from the staircases back here, whereas if a flanker goes up there, he won't really have immediate line of sight to anyone standing on top of this castle. Also, standing on top of that tower makes it a lot easier for a defender to eventually retreat all the way back. Okay, so now again, for the attackers in this last section, generally this is a section that needs to be snowballed because it's very long and very narrow, which means that the defenders have an innate advantage because the attackers need to kind of clump up, and there are very long sight lines, which benefit the defense a bit more since they can see where the attackers are coming from. So yeah.
Mine in a confined space. Manitin has a party ultimate at the end.
That's right. So a very fast point A take for Florida Mayhem, a great start for them here on Eichenwalde.
Right,
Plenty of time.
Gonna move their way up into the castle right now and try and play aggressively as the members are coming off of spawn, and that's going to be a DMAC immediately. Nevic's not going to fall, does actually get healed up, and the Valkyrie comes out on the side of Dak.
Here comes the Riptire. Oh, finds two, actually.
That's a huge set of kills. Dak was in the Valkyrie at the time, so finishing off the Diva is going to be a pretty good stagger on the side of the Florida Mayhem. Unfortunately, the cart has not really moved because it was getting stalled out on the other side. Let's take a look right now. There's one mine, there's two mines, and he'll find himself a double.
Oh. Mine.
You sound
it's
like
all mine.
A seagull from Finding Nemo.
That's right. Or just a very greedy person. Depicts a greedy person, man. He wants all those kills. He's like, mine. Logic's over on the McCree now.
Nevix will be going back to the Genji, so a triple support look from the San Francisco Shock. Now remember, when Nevix played on the same team as these Florida players, he was a DPS.
Yep.
So he's going back to their roots. It is a flexibility that San Francisco Shock have, and they seem to be wanting Nevix to play these projectile heroes. So Swoosh is just gonna place that bongo right on top of the card as it continues to roll all the way through and towards the end of point B right now. Dak has resurrected Baby Bay, but it's gonna get pulled out to the side. Looks like they are gonna have to back off.
Yeah, I think so. They lost their back line early, man. They lost the McCree, they lost the Zenyatta as well. Zebasai falling to Dante again. And I mean, you can definitely tell Dante is back in the game, man. He is doing Dante things. He's stalling the payload, he's getting those picks, and he's making it pretty tough for Florida to push through point B here.
Hey, the coordination, the communication, you can see working well for the San Francisco Shock, even when they were losing some of those fights. Supports with a mine in a confined space. Manitin has a party ultimate at the end.
That's right. So a very fast point A take for Florida Mayhem, a great start for them here on Eichenwalde.
This play is smart by the Mayhem. You do want to snowball one team fights usually, but them snowballing here actually has another reason past just taking the first point a few seconds ago. Not only did they take the first point, but they managed to kill 5 people within a single second, thanks to Mayhem's Junkrat taking everyone down at once alongside Roadhog using Whole Hog. This leads to the Shock all respawning at the exact same time. The Mayhem are using this to their advantage. They know that Orisa is excellent at taking space, and they also know that Junkrat will have a blast spamming bombs into the tight corridors the Shock have to walk through. So instead of playing the slow game and picking off the Shock after they get on the high ground, they push up and place their shield down right at the start to create space. They are a few seconds too late, which allows Shock's D.Va to exit already with their Winston following behind. However, this could still get very messy. They are keeping one player on the card to keep pushing, but the Mayhem really want to snowball this entire second phase. Destroy the Shock with their superior comp as they are running out of spawn, and then use the immense amount of ult charge they get to snowball even further, essentially spawn camping the Shock.
Plenty of time. Gonna move their way up into the castle right now and try and play aggressively as the members are coming off of spawn, and that's going to be a D-Mech immediately.
While their slightly unfortunate timing of being a few seconds too late did hinder the results they could get from this play, they nonetheless managed to take down Shock's D.Va mech. Shock's Mercy decides to use Valkyrie for some reason, which probably was a reaction to the potential spam that could come in. She wanted to counter that spam into her teammates, who could be pulled together by Orisa's halt with her chaining Valkyrie heals, but the Mayhem take their D.Va desuit and fall back.
Not going to fall, does actually get healed up, and the Valkyrie...
I do want to mention that Shock's Tracer actually made a very smart play here. Instead of just succumbing to the spam, he predicted that the fight was going to be a loss anyways, and tried to cut his losses by pushing all the way through and stalling the payload for as long as possible. He could see that only one player on Mayhem's side was pushing the cart, which meant that he could easily take that fight and waste the Mayhem's time, applying point pressure and forcing them to fall back to clear the cart, which ideally gives the Shock the space they need to get out of spawn and take castle control. This was overall a very smart play by Dante.
Comes out on the side of Dak.
Here comes the Riptire. Oh, fine.
They do manage to actually take D.Va down completely, who is consequently getting resurrected by the Valking Mercy, which is questionable, but the Mayhem keep on going, using all the ult charge they just got to snowball using the Junkrat tire. They are starting to lose some steam now as their ult advantage is going away, especially with Mayhem's McCree also using his Ainun somewhere, probably to zone, but this dominance and aggressive play is really paying off, and the Shock are struggling to retake. They probably should have taken the right exit instead of the left at the second checkpoint from the defender's perspective, but they might not have anticipated the Mayhem pushing in so aggressively. Against comps like this that really rely on close quarters engagements, it can be expected, however, that they try to snowball, so they could have anticipated this.
One mine, there's two mines, and he'll find himself a double.
Oh. Mine.
You sound
it's
like
all mine.
A seagull from Finding Nemo.
That's right. Or just a very greedy person. Vic's a greedy person, man. He wants all those kills. He's like, mine.
Up until this point, Shock's Tracer has been staying alive in Mayhem's backline, making it easier for his team to engage from the front and apply pressure from the front and the back. Staying alive there was important for him. Contesting the card for a few more seconds wouldn't have really done much, but staying alive steals the Mayhem's peace of mind and allows the Shock to engage whenever they want, since he'll be ready to pressure. Also, the Shock have finally done it. They finally embraced their insanity of a roster and put Nevix on Genji. This comp is kind of a mess, and it's really just all about comfort picks. They're all playing characters they enjoy and feel comfortable on, except for Deck, probably, but that's just how the meta works right now, I guess. And try to take the win that way. Probably not really the best strategy, but it's better than nothing. This setup that the Shock have right now, however, puts the Mayhem in an incredibly bad position. If they decide to fall back, they are going to get destroyed by Shock's Tracer, and if they don't pay any attention to that Tracer, then she will be able to do as much damage as she wants, being completely uncontested. So this is definitely a fight that would favor the Shock, especially after the excellent coordination between Shock's Tracer and Genji.
Logic's over on the McCree now.
Nevix will be going back to the Genji, so a triple support look from...
I am interested in Winston's plan here. While it is true that Tracer and Genji should dive in together as often as possible, and building synergy between the two characters is incredibly important, they are breaking one fundamental rule of playing that combo, or any flanker in general. Never dash in from the front. They didn't really have another choice here, because getting behind the Mayhem would have been impossible for Shock's Genji, but if they decide to actually dive in from the front, they need the support from their front line. Now in an ideal comp, they would run a Winston D.Va, Tracer Genji dive, with the Zenyatta Mercy as support. The Mercy could keep the tanks topped off, the Zenyatta takes care of the flankers with Harmony and discord their targets, the Winston bubbles and body blocks a bunch of damage, and the D.Va uses her Matrix to keep everyone alive until it runs out, and she starts dealing DPS too. But the Shock are missing the D.Va, and I'm not quite sure why Shock's Winston was up there on the castle. If Shock's Tracer and Genji had a Winston bubble, and potentially even a defense matrix, they could have survived. But without the D.Va, they simply weren't given enough time to actually eliminate the Mayhem's threats, so they'll die. This is actually incredibly bad, because they were fighting around a corner. Fighting around this corner, or any corner to be honest, is great for defenders, because the corners allow them to control their line of sight. They have full control over how many enemies they are exposed to, so taking the fight here was definitely a good idea. Another reason they want to rush a fight here is because they don't want the Mayhem to push through the bridge, which would give them access to the castle high ground. Having a McCree and Junkrat up there would allow them to apply a lot of pressure, and if the Shock decides to dive them, they can simply drop down and join their team. So now that the Shock lost both of their flankers, it's looking very bad. If they end up losing this fight, the Mayhem would have enough momentum and ultimates to finish this entire phase, especially looking at the Shock's per ult economy.
The San Francisco Shock. Now remember,
Shock Soldier is positioning himself extremely risky here. I would even say too risky. He's the only character that could have actually just stayed on the high ground and contribute to the fight without putting himself at too much risk. But he ends up flanking all the way around? He probably had a good reason for it. The Mayhem, however, realized that he is no real threat behind them anyways, so they just focus on clearing the card of people contesting instead of wasting their time with the Shock Soldier, since he'll eventually have to come out of hiding.
when Nevix played on the same...
Mayhem's McCree is wasting a lot of time here. He should have just let him be, rejoin his team on the card, and not give Shock Soldier any opportunities. But him using his flashbang here gives Shock Soldier some important information. McCree is not really a character that wants to take long-range engagements with Soldier out of cover. At a medium to long distance and no cover, the Soldier is going to win the engagements the majority of the time. The only way the McCree could win is by peek shooting and using his flashbang. But for one, the McCree just used his flashbang, and second of all, he's going to walk back to the payload now. The payload is on the street, so the McCree has to cross the street, which will leave him incredibly exposed.
Team is these Florida players. He was a DPS.
Yep.
So he's going back to their roots. It is a flexibility that San Francisco...
Long distance? Check. Out in the open, on the street, without any cover? Check. This is a very easy kill for Shock Soldier, and him cleaning up the Zenyatta as well was just icing on the cake. Looking at the kill feed, however, the Mayhem still have an advantage, even with them losing 2 players, but Shock Soldier managed to get the most out of a very bad situation.
Shock have, and they seem to be wanting Nevix to play these projectile heroes. Over Swoosh is going to place that bongo right on top of the card as it continues to roll all the way through and towards the end of point.
The Mayhem needed to make a decision here. Either they take care of all the Shock players that ended up behind them, or push hard and stuff the 2 exits next to the checkpoint so that the stranded Shock players can't get any reinforcements, and the Mayhem can use their incredibly strong stuff comp to keep the Shock in their spawn. If the Mayhem would go for the second play and stuff the entrances, I would suggest a similar strategy to the one they used on the first point. Split their team up and cover both entrances. But they didn't go for this play, and the main reason for that is that they just don't have the players to push their spawn. I am very confident that had the Mayhem not just lost their McCree and Zenyatta, they would have split up into 2 1-1-1 combos and stuffed the entrances. But they didn't want to risk it, so they decided to go for the first plan and walk back while cleaning up. They do, however, mess up their halt hook combo. This looks like a huge flaw in communication. Ideally, Orisa calls out the Genji on the bridge and that she plans to halt him, and then the Roadhog would follow up with a hook. Considering that the Genji is already hit, a hook would 100% guarantee a kill as long as the Genji wouldn't deflect, but even without the hook, Shock's Genji is in a pretty bad place. But that doesn't happen. Mayhem's Roadhog keeps walking and seems to focus on the rest Soldier down the street, while Orisa tries her best to take down Shock's Genji. Both plays are understandable. Mayhem's Orisa sees the opportunity to get an easy pick on the bridge, whereas Roadhog wants to prevent getting sandwiched on the street by taking out the Soldier behind them. The problem wasn't that either plan was bad, it's that they really needed to be on the same page. target calls are definitely needed here. Either they just made a mistake, or maybe Mayhem Zenyatta is their primary target caller, which wouldn't be unreasonable, and as such, they are a bit lost with him dying. If that's the case, then establishing a clear caller hierarchy would definitely be an important thing to get out of the way in case the main caller isn't present.
B right now, Dak has resurrected Baby Bay, but it's going to get pulled out to the side. Looks like they are going to have to back off.
Yeah, I think so. They lost their back line early, man. They lost the McCree, they lost the Zenyatta as well. Zebasai falling to Dante again. And I mean, you can definitely tell Dante is back in the game, man. He is doing Dante things. He's stalling the payload, he's getting those picks, and he's making it pretty tough for Florida to push through point B here.
Hey, the coordination and the communication you can see working well for the San Francisco Shock. Even when they were losing some of those fights, Dante at least did some work by making sure that they weren't going to get the cart moving as quickly as the Mayhem would have liked. They're now going to set up on the low ground. San Francisco Shock is on top right now. Baby Bay on his favorite and best hero traditionally, Soldier 76.
Yep. They see me roll in. Oh, Doc hating.
Well, they certainly hated that, but
yep.
They're going to go and reset right now. They're trying to head through the castle onto the backside of the drawbridge.
Manitin pops out, take a breather as he gets out. I mean, that 50% damage reduction on Roadhog, that helps quite a bit when you're getting chased by a couple DPS. Ooh, Nevix comes in, and Tavik is like mine once again, denying that ultimate, and just moving forward, taking out Sleepy as well, and Manitin just able to zone. It's a zoning ultimate.
It's a zoning ultimate. Make sure you get across the bridge there.
That's right.
Make sure you get to that point B, but Nevix comes in with the Dragon Blade. He not only dies, it's also...
Right now, the Mayhem are really just trying to regroup. There isn't much to comment on. Shock's Soldier used his technical visor, a smart choice considering that they have a positional advantage and that their ult economy is looking pretty stable. So him using his ult to further stagger the Mayhem and buy his teammates, especially Shock's Genji and Tracer, more time to farm their ults was a good play. The Mayhem know that a full-on engagement won't really favor them, so they are looking to regroup fully and then slowly push forward, trying to get a pick before taking the fight. They have quite a few ults, so the Shock just want to stall, while the Mayhem, especially Junkrat, want to try and get an early advantage with their ults. Hitting a Riptire on Mercy is definitely the win condition here. That would turn an 8v8 into an 8v5 for the Mayhem, counting in Mercy's resurrects. So the fight would basically be an almost guaranteed win, especially considering their strong ult economy right now.
Sure that they weren't going to get the cart moving as quickly as the Mayhem would have liked. They're now going to set up on the low ground. San Francisco Shock is on top right now. Baby Bay on his favorite and best hero traditionally, Soldier 76.
Yep. They see me roll in.
This was so incredibly huge. Mayhem's Junkrat Tavik actually didn't execute his ultimate perfectly. He missed the Mercy a bit earlier, and once he found her, he got stuck a little. But he actually managed to take her down. I really would love to listen to their comms during this moment, because this gives them an insane advantage, and as such, the Mayhem go for the Valkyrie, and probably other ults in order to close out this fight and take the checkpoint. It's not unwinnable for the Shock. Shock's Genji could go for a great blade, and Shock's Tracer could potentially get a pick on someone, but it is very unlikely.
Oh, Doc hating.
Well, they certainly hated that, but
yep.
They're going to go and reset right now. They're trying to head through the castle onto the backside of the drawbridge.
Manitin pops out, take a breather as he gets out. I mean, that 50% damage reduction on Roadhog, that helps quite a bit when you're getting chased by a couple DPS. Ooh, Nevix comes in, and Tavik is like mine once again, denying that ultimate, and just moving forward, taking out Sleepy as well, and Manitin just able to zone.
So both Shock's Genji and Shock's Tracer realized that the only way they would win this fight is by using their ultimates in order to bring back the advantage and stop the push. But neither of them worked. Transcendence blocked the blade and the pulse bomb missed, although it getting a kill wouldn't have really changed much. It was the correct choice to ult here, because forcing Mayhem Zenyatta to use Transcendence now gives Shock's Soldier a window of opportunity to wreak havoc without having to worry about Zenyatta's ultimate. And Shock's Tracer had to use Pulse Bomb the first opportunity she sees, so they definitely made the right decisions here. It's just the execution that was lacking, but that's okay. Okay, So now let's quickly go over the last section, although this one isn't really that interesting, it's kind of straightforward. This entire first part of it is usually not contested a lot. The defenders usually prefer defending around this first corner here, so everything before that is usually ignored, and the main reason for that is because of vision. So if the defenders would defend all the way over here, then it would be too easy for the attackers to flank, take control of this high ground, and then eventually kind of encircle the defending team. Okay, so it's much better for the defenders to just hold a little further back, and this way they know that every incoming attack needs to come from this one direction. And this is also the reason why characters such as Reinhardt are very, very strong here, because Reinhardt can just hold up his barrier towards this one direction, and he knows that he'll be relatively safe. And the only way someone could circumvent that is by going through this flank road here, which again is within the vision of the defending team. Okay. Now this part isn't really that interesting either, but it could be a bit more interesting. So usually the defenders don't want to, or at least they want to avoid defending around this second corner. It's still very, very strong to defend, and I would say the defenders do still have an advantage, especially with the closer spawns. But if they need to hold here, this basically gives the attackers free access to this flank route, and thus this area up here, this area all the way back here. And the attackers can then try to encircle the defending team eventually. Okay. So yes, it's definitely to the defender's advantage to hold around the first corner. The second corner is nice, but they shouldn't really count on it too much. They do still have the advantage, but I would say that it's less of an advantage than if the card was still at the first corner.
The Dragon Blade, he not only dies, it's also the Mercy that dies. Yeah. So pretty much no hope of winning that engagement afterwards. Sleepy also finds himself trapped.
Question for you, Monica. How does Zenyatta activate that trap to begin with? He's not even stepping on the ground. Yeah. That's unfair. He should be immune to Junkrat traps, in my opinion. And that has that has nothing to do with me being a Zenyatta main, by the way.
No bias.
No bias at all.
No bias at all.
Totally unbiased.
That's a nice pick from Sleepy. Dak still sitting on a Valkyrie, so this will be a bit of a slower grind right now for the Mayhem. You're going to have to back off with Logix falling early on, not quite timing the hook around the shields. Yeah. Not going to find much there, but trying to poke his way as much as he can, play around the Orisa barrier.
You know, this is generally where things slow down on point C here. The payload gets stalled out. Nevic's pulled in. Vic, all right, he finds Nomi with that Riptire. I was going to say things slow down, but sometimes if you get the right picks at the right time, they don't. Nomi brought back up via the Valkyrie on the San Francisco Shock side. Both Mercies popping their own, and now Zenyatta trying to keep everybody alive. Oh, Riptire finds a bongo and finds Swoosh. Zebasai having to use another res on that Mercy to keep him alive. They really want this push to make it. This is the one that they're really going all in on.
Yeah, they are. They're trying to make it work right now. Unfortunately, that Deadeye, the targets disappeared right around the corner. Yeah. And so he wasn't able to get the biggest value out of that, but Manitin can continue to drive the cart forward by pushing the enemy team off.
Yeah, you're always going to get some good distance with that. They've nearly got it there, just 3.5 meters to go. Graviton Surge comes in, and this is San Francisco's option, or opportunity rather, to push him back, but no, Twix says, you know what? I haven't gotten enough kills on Junkrat yet in this series. I'm gonna get a couple more with my ultimate. Another zoning ult comes in for Logix here. Oh, gets question for you, Monica. How does Zenyatta activate that trap to begin with? He's not even stepping on the ground. Yeah. That's unfair. He should be immune to Junkrat traps, in my opinion. And that has that has nothing to do with me being a Zenyatta main, by the way. No.
I'm pretty confident that the Shock are really just experimenting here. And if this was a very important match, they would not play this sort of comp. But then again, if this was a very important match, they wouldn't run with this roster in the first place. So it just confirms that they are running experiments until the roster is complete. It's not like Dante is a bad Zarya, quite far from it actually. His Zarya is pretty decent. But putting Nomi on D.Va is a band-aid fix, and Baby Beyond Junkrat is questionable. He is an insane hitscan player. Most of those skills just don't translate well into Junkrat. He would play a good Junkrat, of course, but having a dedicated projectile player on the team pick him up would allow them to do so much more. Also, Shock Dante switching from Tracer to Zarya gives another reason for why he used his Pulse Bomb earlier. No point in keeping it when it'll disappear after the swap anyways. I'm afraid, however, that the pick might not get the momentum it needs. The Mayhem are in a very good position right now, and it'll take a while for Shock's Zarya to get her ultimate. Once she does, however, they can absolutely destroy people. The only defensive ultimate that the Mayhem possess is their Transcendence, which means that they won't be invulnerable. Sure, Transcendence heals a lot, but if Shock's Zarya lands a big Graviton Surge, Shock's Junkrat can come in with a left-click mine combo dealing well over 200 damage within hundreds of a second to everyone trapped inside. It's basically like a pulse bomb, it's just slightly more difficult to execute, but has the huge advantage of not needing ultimate charge. Shock's Zarya can use her ultimate whenever she thinks the moment is right, and Shock's Junkrat can follow up as long as he is alive and has at least one mine. They can also combo it with the D.Va ultimate, but that wouldn't be a good reason alone to pick the D.Va. I am personally slightly confused about why they would pick D.Va here. Now they do swap her in a second, but just the initial thoughts are confusing me. She won't really be able to help anyone who is getting hooked by Mayhem's Roadhog, and she herself is also very vulnerable to Junkrat spam and Roadhog hooks thanks to her huge hitbox. Reinhardt is a better choice here. Sure, his shield wouldn't last that long, but it can block hooks and allows Shock's Zarya to better control when she is taking damage and how much thanks to shield dancing, which helps with gaining energy. Since the Mayhem don't have a Reinhardt of their own, and this last section of the map is pretty narrow, he should be able to land consistent Earth Chargers as well, as long as he plays around the Orisa area, which is easier to beat than a Reinhardt shield. Nomi is arguably also just a better main tank player than off tank, and that's why he is on the roster, to play main tanks. Reinhardt would also be a comfort pick for him, allowing him to utilize much more experience and expertise than on D.Va. Similar to Baby Bay, he won't be a bad D.Va or anything, but it's bizarre that they didn't put him on Reinhardt immediately, and I don't think that the Junkrat spam is enough of a reason to change your team comp this much.
No bias.
No bias.
Man, I love Sleepy's play. Such a great Zenyatta. Splitting himself off from the team to go for a peek here is just what they needed. Don't get me wrong, this is going to get rezzed anyways, most likely, but it's still a great pick. Considering all of the swaps that they did, he probably realized that they are going to come out of spawn very weak. So if he would have played back, then they would lose anyways. So he just goes out, takes the risks, and buys his team a bunch of time. Also, it seems like Shock are playing triple tank now. Luckily, Nomi decided to switch to Reinhardt, which was definitely the right choice, but I wouldn't put Nevix on D.Va still. He could have just stayed on Genji. The D.Va really doesn't add anything to this team, so why not let him play a comfort pick instead? They probably had a reason for it. Maybe they just wanted to experiment. But just looking at it from a pure winning standpoint, I feel like their comp is still very, very weird. Maybe they could have put Nevix on Junkrat and keep Baby Bay on Soldier. That way they would both have sorta comfort picks, and the comp would be just as good, if not better, than what they were running right now. Mayhem's Junkrat is just going to drown in ult charge here most likely.
No bias at all.
Totally unbiased.
That's a nice pick from Sleepy. Dak still sitting on a Valkyrie, so this will be a bit of a slower grind right now for the Mayhem. You're going to have to back off with Logix falling early on, not quite timing the hook around the shields.
Yeah.
Not going to find much there, but trying to poke his way as much as he can, play around the Orisa barrier.
Now, this is generally where...
This actually shows really well how the Zarya pick was strong. Not just because of the combo with Junkrat, but also because of the way she denies the Mayhem their primary combo. Shock's Zarya can just preemptively bubble anyone who gets halted by Orisa and swim in energy. But that still doesn't explain the D.Va pick. Sure, she can defense matrix the targets who are getting hooked, but I feel like a Reinhardt Zarya is good enough to deal with the Mayhem strategy. Maybe they just wanted to play it safe, run triple tank, and completely prevent the Mayhem from executing their strategy. But the problem is that the Mayhem really don't rely on the hook combo that much. It's not what has been winning them this game up to this point. They didn't get that many combos this far, if any at all. That could just be because the Shock played around it, and they want to play more aggressively now using these new defensive measures, but even then they simply lack the damage to actually win a team fight, especially without having a second DPS ultimate to work with. D.Va's ultimate is pretty good on this last point, but a Dragon Blade would have been stronger.
Things slow down on point C here. The payload gets stalled out. Nevix pulled in. Vic, all right, he finds Nomi with that Riptire. I was going to say things slow down, but sometimes if you get the right picks at the right time, they don't. Nomi brought back up.
Looking at the kill feed, this fight is actually looking pretty good for the Shock. It looks even, but the Shock have the spawn advantage, and the Mayhem actually finished off Pilot D.Va, which means that she can just get a new mech after getting resurrected. Shock's Junkrat has his ultimate too, which buys them some time they definitely need looking at the ult charge of Shock's Zarya and Reinhardt. Once they get those ultimates, they can start rotating them each teamfight and eventually stem the Mayhem's defense. However, with 50% still missing, they need something to fill in the time, otherwise they lose before they even get their strongest ults. This is what I was referring to earlier about the swap being pretty late. Zarya needs to have some energy and ult charge going into this last point, so swapping to her this late is extremely risky and needs some other ultimates to buy her time.
Yeah, the Valkyrie on the San Francisco Shock side, both Mercies popping their own, and now Zenyatta trying to keep them.
Knowing that they really want to finish this fight right here, right now, before the Shock get their big tank ultimates, Mayhem Zenyatta uses Transcendence. Shock's Junkrat, however, got his ultimate incredibly fast, probably during their own Transcendence a moment ago, which shuts down the Mayhem's main tank and forces them to fall back slightly. This is good, because the Mayhem used this Transcendence aggressively. They wanted to finish the game here, so having to fall back after using all these ultimates is a pretty big blow.
Everybody alive. Oh, Riptire finds a bongo and finds Swoosh. Zebasai having to use another res on that Mercy to keep him alive. They really want this push to make it. This is the one that they're really going all in on.
Yeah, they are. They're trying to make it work right now. Unfortunately, that Deadeye, the targets disappeared right around the corner.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't able to get the biggest value out of that, but Manitin can continue to drive the cart forward by pushing the enemy team off.
Yeah, you're always going to get some good distance with that. They've nearly...
Baby Bay just swapped here because he wanted to get back to the point faster, and he didn't want to go Tracer because the threat of Mayhem's Junkrat, McCree and Roadhog would have been too big, so going for the Genji here, considering D.Va was already taken, is definitely good. The Shock aren't really in a great position right now anyways, especially with Mayhem's Junkrat almost having his ultimate, so at this moment in time, the fight is definitely lost already most likely.
Got it there just 3.5 meters to go. Graviton Surge comes in, and this is San Francisco's option, or opportunity rather, to push him back. But no, Twix says, you know what? I haven't gotten enough kills on Junkrat yet in this series. I'm going to get a couple more with my ultimate. Another zoning ult comes in for ioStux here. Oh, gets Nevix and Baby.
So, the Shock tried their hardest to defend, even getting a few kills with the Graviton Surge, but it was way too late by then. Mayhem's Junkrat managed to get his ultimate, and at that point, the game was over. If I could give advice to the teams, I think that the Shock made the right choice in just trying out team comps considering their unfinished roster, but I really hope that they knew that those comps wouldn't really be optimal. It's quite a shame really. I hope that the Shock will get together for Season 1 and show some prepared strategies executed perfectly. Despite the Shock's handicap, the Mayhem played surprisingly well. Some coordination issues in Streets phase and individual misplay at the first and second phase too, but overall they had a plan and they stuck with it. And I respect that. Shock's roster, in my opinion, had more individual talent than the Mayhem, although both teams are obviously great, but the fact that they managed to push all the way to the end on Eichenwalde, which isn't a given, really shows how strategy and teamwork easily outweighs individual skill at these higher ranks. I do, however, think that once the Shock have their full roster and use the data they collect in the preseason to come up with real main season strats, the Mayhem shouldn't really be a challenge for them in situations like these. And over the scope of the entire series, the Shock did beat the Mayhem pretty decisively. The reason I chose this spot in particular was to explain the strategic element and how Overwatch seems to live up to the promise of being a team game, at least at the highest level of play.